Welcome to another episode of the Above the Business podcast. My name is Bradley Hamner, your host. On today's episode, we have my good friend and repeat guest, Chad Cannon, who really is the growth guy. He worked with Donald Miller, worked with Michael Hyatt, but he has helped also so many businesses to be able to scale their companies. There really is not anybody that I personally know that understands what it looks like to be able to scale companies nearly as much as Chad. And specifically, what we're going to talk about today in today's episode is the blueprint from 3 to 10 million. We talk often about the different blueprints from 0 to 3, 3 to 1 million, a million to three. But Chad is uniquely positioned that understands that 3 to 10 million space. So even if you're not in that arena, if you want to understand the differences between what those companies are doing and what you may be doing one day whenever you get there, this episode is for you. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Chad Cannon. Chad, welcome to the Above the Business podcast.
Thanks, Bradley. Excited to be here. Is this my, I feel like it's the second or third time on the podcast with you. So honored to be back, whether it's the second or the third.
It's great to have you. It's crazy that we're recording this after spending a weekend together, which was super awesome. So it was great to spend time with you personally. But
Absolutely.
uh, Chad, you and I've gotten to know each other obviously over the last several years, and for our audience, right, we talk a lot around having a business blueprint. And one of the things that I thought would be great for us to start off with and kind of noodle on today is the space that we typically look at having different blueprints is in this, what's it look like to have a stage-based blueprint from 300,000 to a million, and then a one from 1 to 3 million, and then 3 million plus. And I typically would then say 3 million to 10 million.
Hmm.
Certainly, there's a lot of different ways for people to cut that up. And we typically on the podcast really focus in on that 300,000 to a million, the million to 3 million space. And there's really, honestly, while you're a good friend, there's really not anybody that I know that has the depth of experience in personally helping companies in that space and being a part of those companies, but then also working with other businesses to be able to scale from that space. And so, what I thought would be a great part for us to discuss is the similarities, but also the differences in having a blueprint for your business from that, say, 3 to 10 million space. So, with that context, what do you first think are maybe some of the biggest differences that you see with the companies that are in that space, 3 to 10, than what some of the smaller businesses face on a day-to-day basis when they're trying to grow their company?
Man, that's a great question. I love having this conversation. I've been thinking about that since you kind of just like seeded it to me earlier today. It's like, hey, this is the angle we want to take. And actually, one that just came to my mind, which I think is probably the thing we need to start with first, is it's a different mindset for the owner.
Mm,
Um, like, and what I mean by that is there are going to be things that you no longer are involved with in your business that at one point you did everything. And the reality is no one is going to be able to do them as good as you. Certain things. There's going to be some things that people can do better than you. There's going to be some things you're going to have to be willing to give up as a business owner, and someone else may only be able to do it 70 or 80%, but that's actually what's going to be best for the business.
mm,
And your mindset is going to have to be okay with that. Um, and so, from a sales standpoint, typically no one's going to be able to come in, I mean, and do the same that you're going to be if you're the primary salesperson, depending on your company, whether it's a product or service, and you're selling it. So that's the second thing is one, you're typically no longer the rainmaker. You can be the rainmaker up until probably certain types of businesses in the million to 3 million. A lot of times that's where you start to hire your first salesperson, and but maybe you're still involved. Maybe you're selling 70%, the other person's selling 30. Um, but I also see a lot of times founder-led CEOs or companies, they hire a salesperson and they think that person's just going to come in and do it, doesn't do a great job of training, onboarding, person doesn't do well, so that person gets back in and that person feels like, oh my gosh, I just lost 2 years in the business because everything that I was doing that I thought I'd be able to do since I wasn't doing sales, now I got to jump back into sales, and then no one else takes with other things. And so you've got a good sales process and a good salesperson or team, depending on the type of product that you sell and how many leads you have coming in. um, and then I think third, there's, I know you talk about this with your clients, but know your numbers. And it's
Mm.
different in the $3 to $10 million range. It's different. There's a lot more at stake. I literally was with a client today where we were mapping out our budget for next year, and we called it really a global omni-channel brainstorming meeting where it's like, hey, this business has been built on the backs of this year. We spent $450,000 on meta ad spend. That's how we've driven the growth. We've started testing Google, YouTube with ChatGPT World. We're going into Reddit, all of this. So we're going to take 10% of our marketing budget next year, which is going to be north of, because this we scaled from 3 to, we'll do probably 7 million this year, and
Mm.
we want to go to beyond a million next year. So what I typically tell my clients is like, hey, whatever your revenue is this year, let's take 10% of it, spend that next year. So we'll come in between 7 and 8. So let's just roughly say, hey, we're going to take an ad budget of 700K next year, and we're going to divide that up across our channels. And so the majority of that's still going to be Meta, but we're going to take 10% off of that, and we're going to experiment and test.
Mm.
We're going to test on Google, we're going to test on YouTube, we're going to test on Reddit, TikTok, all of it. And if you guys don't know, Reddit is becoming a game changer right now in advertising because ChatGPT, that is what ChatGPT is referencing first and foremost when doing search queries.
Wow.
So Reddit is huge. If you are not dabbling, even from like a organic Reddit, you've got to be there. And the thing about Reddit is it's the wild, wild west right now, and it has been. It's always been the wild, wild west. But it's why it's being prioritized is because it's user reviewed. It can't be manipulated typically from an SEO perspective. But because of that, you have to be good with the bad. There's going to be people that don't like your company and that's been burned. Reddit has been a place where you can go and be crazy and say whatever you want. And that's just that you're gonna have to be okay with that in the world because ChatGPT is relying on it. Like if you have ChatGPT and you do a long form like deep research, it'll it queries Reddit more than anything.
Mm.
So that's super important. Know your numbers. So we thing we started was we looked at our cost per acquisition across all of our channels by product, and it's just a different level of detail. And if you're not spending on ads, and you're a company that gets referrals, you need to know your conversion rate. Hey, when a lead comes in, how many of those turn into sales calls? How many of those sales calls get converted? Because you need to know at some point, most businesses grow out of referrals. There's a ceiling for referral based business. You
Yep.
then have to do some form of marketing, some form of advertising, even if it's being out in the community and building relationships and starting to network because you didn't do that. You have to be able to reverse engineer your numbers to be able to project growth. To say, hey, we need 100 leads that gets us 80 sales calls. We convert 40 of those. Our average deal size is this. And then each month we're looking at that. Are we on pace? Are we behind? What that looks like. So knowing your numbers. And I think fourth is there becomes a layer of leadership and management inside your company that whereas before, you may have an all hands meeting and you're, you know, saying, hey, this week our focus is this, everyone go march and do it. Everyone kind of talks to everyone in Slack or email and everyone knows what everyone's doing. 3 to 10 million, you become there's teams that become specialized. You start to have a management team that has separate meetings than the rest of the team that are making decisions for the organization. You're trusting them to then take that message and communicate down. You're not involved in all of those meetings, and um, it changes the culture because at one point, and I remember this vividly in both organizations when we crossed over that 3 million mark and we really scaled, and we're dealing with this company I talked about today, is they no longer feel like they have access to the founder, and it's
Mm.
not purposeful. It is just the necessary evil of the business owner can't be involved in everything.
Yeah.
And people that liked that and felt like, oh, I'm part of a company that I get my say in everything is like it's just impossible. When you start to math out someone's calendar, they can't do that for us to be able to grow. And so that starts to happen. Those people either decide they either know they either learn that that's not going to change. In fact, it's actually only going to become increasingly more gap, and they're okay with it, or they decide, hey, I don't want that. I want to be part of another company. And so you
Mm.
start to lose people that were important on the way to 3 million, but on the way to 10, typically, this is something Michael Hyatt coached in our company all the time, was we are growing like a rocket ship. This company has grew from 3 to 7 million that I'm working with. We'll probably grow from 7 to 12 next year. just think about that. Like if you're not growing at as fast as the company, you're going to get left behind, which
Mm,
means not just you as the owner, but your expectation of people on your team. We're growing at, sometimes 80%. Are you growing 80% inside this company year
yeah.
over year personally? And if not, you're going to be left behind,
Mm,
And so you have to be growing as fast as the company. And that's the case in these fast growing companies, but even companies that are growing 30, 40% year over year, it's the same thing.
yeah.
And so when you get that mindset of the people that want to grow just as fast or faster than the company, that's what accelerates growth in your business.
So the four things to go back over them. Number one, the mindset of the owner has to evolve, and I want to pull on
Hmm.
some things you were just
Yep.
mentioned there. Secondly, you just really can't sit in the rainmaker seat almost at all,
Hmm.
in that position of the rainmaker seat from the sales perspective. Number three, the level of detail of knowing your numbers. Clearly, if you're listening to this and you're at 40,000, $500,000 run rate, you're sure knowing your numbers is important, but there's a handful. The level of
Hmm.
detail changes when you're talking 700,000 in monthly ad spend. And then number four, you start getting in layers of leadership, and decisions are made, big decisions even are made outside of one single person, the founder owner's decision making that happens. I want to go back up to mindset for a second. And that is, you brought up something and you were actually even tying it in at the very end. Let's think about the owner slash owners. It could be two, it
Hmm.
could be
Yep.
two
Yep.
or three potentially. But um, I believe that especially in that first, the space I was talking about earlier, that 300,000 to 3 million, I think that the business owner's mindset and how they see things has to evolve first, and then the
Hmm.
business gets pulled to that,
So
right?
true. Yep. Hmm.
So like there's a business that I know that, they were at 400,000, and that business owner himself, they now do 4 million. That he has evolved so much himself. Like, and so now one of the last things that we were talking about is how does he need to show up and operate as a $10 million business owner? Like, how does he need to show up
Hmm.
first
Hmm.
before the company actually gets to that level? Does that make sense? And what are
Totally.
your thoughts around how much you've seen uh, the owner slash owners evolve and change over time to be able to stick with
Totally.
the
Yeah.
business that's growing that fast?
Yeah. It's so true. I think of, the saying is always you dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Yep.
Think about that from a mindset. It's like, hey, if you've got a vision for a company to be doing 10 million, be doing 3 million, you're not going to be hanging around people that are making 3 million. You want to hang around people that are making 10 million. You want to find groups, you want to find people that have done that before you. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Find a coaching group, find people in your community that are doing it. Um, there's so many free resources out there. I mean, like podcasts. I mean, Dyer, the CEO, like, he talks about so much, but like, I think it's one of the most amazing podcasts where he touches on culture, he touches on business, he touches on a lot. But you know, listening to some of his business podcasts, I think are some of the best out there. But you're always learning. That's the thing, is like you're always learning. You're always trying to figure out how to take your mindset to a different level.
Yeah.
And what is it that you need to be bringing to your team? Because at that point, you are just as much like you become a coach to a lot of your team versus a doer. You start to be like, because you're not going to be making as many decisions. That's what's crazy, is the bigger the company gets, the owner's actually making less decisions when they were making at 350,000.
Yeah.
But the decisions are scarier because you have to hire right people, because those people are going to be making more decisions than you made at
Hmm.
350,000 or
Hmm.
750,000. So you've got to trust those people. You can't micromanage them. You've got to trust them. You obviously, what I always say is inspect what you expect, but you don't micromanage.
Yep.
There's an expectation you have for all your people, and it's okay to inspect what you expect. But if you micromanage it, you're going to lose A players. You won't get great people. I think the other thing that this hits on is most people that scale from 3 to 10, they have an operator or an integrator, EOS speak or whatever, but they've got someone that is managing and responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business. and that's reporting up to them, unless that founder CEO is very operations driven. But most times, they're visionaries, things of that nature. So if you are a visionary, it's important to have a right hand person, especially in the 3 to 10, because you will drive people crazy and you will not get anything done because every idea you put out there, everyone's going to go try to execute, even if you
Yeah.
never intended them to execute. I can remember very vividly in Slack, we had to create rules for Michael Hyatt in Slack. The moment you put an idea out in Slack, now 10 people are going to chase that idea and think that it's the gospel, and that's not what we're doing as a business. And you literally just threw it
Yeah.
out there as an idea and didn't want anyone to take action. You wanted people to actually, hey, is this good? Is this bad? So we had to kind of create rules that, okay, there's a small group that you can throw that idea out to, because now, like, our copywriter was in that group. Now that copywriter is not doing their job for what they were supposed to do this week. Now they're doing this, and so just important to have that. And I think that didn't happen until we were, I would guess, probably in that $6 to $7 million range.
Yeah.
And then when we got to north of 10, he wasn't even in Slack, if I'm
Mm.
honest. So.
Yeah. So, it brings in this idea. So I did a podcast Friday, solo podcast on this that is called, I think we literally named it The Swamp. And here, the reason I named it The Swamp, and I didn't tee you up for this, so this would be interesting to get your organic thoughts on this. So I got an email several weeks ago from Hormozy, acquisition.com. And
Hmm.
he was talking about that he believes that the 1 to 3 million space is known as the swamp. And basically the connotation is it's not a good place to be. And I thought to
Hmm.
myself, God, I completely disagree with that. I think the $1 to $3 million space, if that's the lifestyle business you want, can be
Hmm.
phenomenal place
Yep.
to be. You give me a $2 million company throwing off 25% net profit every single year and you pay yourself a nice salary, and you mean to tell me that that's a bad place to be? That's an ideal place to be. With this one caveat, and this is important.
Hmm.
He looks at everything of can you scale that company to 100 million, right? I mean, that's
Totally.
his books,
Yep.
etc.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, if then the vision of the founder or founders is then to go to 30 million, sure, that $1 to $3 million space can be challenging, right?
Hmm.
So, but if your ultimate goal is to have a more of a lifestyle business, that $1 to $3 million space could be fantastic. So
100%.
I'm curious about then I'm not shifting the swamp then to 3 to 10 per se, but there
Hmm.
are some legitimate challenges. And this is why you bring it up about that second in command integrator, COO level person is like, wow, okay, we're going to have to make a big decision on hiring a very expensive second in
Hmm.
command person to be able to scale.
Yep.
How have you seen that and helped companies to kind of navigate through some of those decisions?
Yep. Yeah. So, I've never heard him refer to it as the swamp, but I tend to agree with him, but I also agree with you. And the lifestyle business, if you're doing 2 million, 25% profit and like, hey, you don't want to scale and grow, man, enjoy that. Don't let anyone tell you that's the swamp or that's bad. But in my experience in working with companies that want to grow and scale, the $1 to $3 million range, getting out of that is the hardest to do. It's so hard. Because what I would say is, like, talented people, if you have a really good product or a service and you're an entrepreneur, you can get to 7 figures just by sheer might and will.
Yeah.
Like, you'll work yourself to death, to the bone, to get to $1 million or 2 million. You can't do that to break through 3 million. You just can't. Your sheer might will not get you there, and it's very unique. I never say never because there's always an exception to the rule. But it's the majority. And when I say majority, it's probably 98%. There might be 2% of you that can get north of three and not follow kind of what we're talking about. But because it's super hard, and when you say super expensive COO or integrator in that $1 to $3 million range, I would not hire someone super expensive because it's the fastest way to cut into your margin. If you're in that one
Yep.
to three, you promote someone within that knows your company really well, that's operationally driven and that can grow with the company and that wants to
Mm.
grow with the company. That'll be your fastest way. Because you've already built up trust with them, because you're at that point you're having to rely on them. Hiring someone from the outside that's got a high salary, like because they've done it with someone else, like you'll have resentment. The moment they do something wrong, you're paying them all this money because they're probably going to cut into what you're making initially. I think of that like both with Michael and Don. Are the two companies that I was in, but then even seeing coaching and providing to thousands of others. That until we were probably beyond 5 million is where we typically invested in like a C level operator.
Mm,
But someone, both of them that ended up stepping into the operations role that I would say in that 2 to 6 million, $7 million, started out as VAs to the CEO, got more and more responsibility on the operations side, and basically saw every piece of the business because of how closely they worked with the CEO. And
mhm.
then they became director, and then ultimately both had to kind of step away when they hired a C level person because they got to a point that they couldn't go beyond, and that's just the nature of most companies. It wasn't anything bad about those people, it was just the reality. One of them stepped out, did other things. One of them found a different position in the company, and worked. But that's, to me, if you're 3 million, you need to find someone, I would say, that can do that role, you know like sub 80, potentially maybe make 100 if you have a really good year. you know but C level above 3 million, you're obviously going to pay someone probably 100 to 110 with bonus upside based on the delta of growth or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
The second thing that kind of brought up is, look, a business that I would think, and you speak to this, that's going from 3 to 10 million still needs to try to find a way to keep things simple. But the reality is, what is simple at a 5 million, 6 million, $7 million business is a different level of complexity than a
Hmm.
business that's at, say, 1 million trying to keep things simple. And one of the
Hmm.
examples is when you were mentioning, just kind of whenever you were talking about the kind of the principle of knowing your numbers, and you mentioned you used a word omni-channel as an example. And so with a $700,000 budget, they just have more fuel in the tank to
Hmm.
throw to enough places. Whereas if we're talking about $100,000 total marketing budget, you can't splinter that over so many different
Hmm.
places because you're not putting enough into it to even get
Yep.
any data. So can you talk
Hmm.
about just like the fact that when you get into those levels, you can add in, as an example, different marketing channels in different things because you've got many more people that are able to manage that versus whenever you're at 1 million, as an example.
Totally. Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't, until you're north of 3 million, I wouldn't recommend hitting multiple marketing channels and trying to divide your ad spend. Granted, again, there's an exception to every rule, but if you have the type of business that Meta works, Meta is superior to every other platform. Why we're looking, when we started, on a launch, we used to spend, this business would spend $10,000 on a launch. We spend that per week now on a weekly webinar.
Mm,
It took us 5 years to get there. So that's not something you have overnight. It's not something that, when we started was like where we thought we would be. It just kind of evolved, into that. And so, if you, like, I would say focus, find one good channel that works and own that until you're at a point where then you can. And for us, there's a bunch of data out there in the marketplace that if you, they call it, upper funnel spend, which is basically brand awareness, not the goal of lead acquisition, not customer acquisition, but lead acquisition. If you spend on the upper funnel over time, it drives your CPL and your CPA down. So your cost per lead and your cost per acquisition down because you're spending on awareness. Um, you know, and this is for this type of business. Obviously, the big brands of the world have figured this out for a long time. This is
yep.
why people spend however money on a Super Bowl ad. It's like obviously they're not generating direct to consumer. That's where I've spent most of my life. Is like, hey, spend $10, I expect to make $100 because I got your email. I know what the email funnel looks like. I'm able to convert. That's the life. That's where I've lived. I mean, I've done some brand stuff, but they figured this out a long time ago. I can spend this much money, get this many eyeballs, and their numbers are just different. It's going to require this many eyeballs for us to hit this many billion in sales at this retail outlet,
Mm,
you know,
mm,
or this e-commerce platform. You know darn well. they're not spending money and losing it. Granted, there's some brands that take a risk and they throw their whole thing at the Super Bowl, and they're not in
Yep.
business 3 years later. But that was their, someone in marketing talked the owners into doing it. But GoDaddy wouldn't exist without a Super Bowl ad.
Yep.
GoDaddy was one that took that risk and it worked. There's just as many companies that it worked and it didn't work, and that's just kind of the nature of business, right?
Yeah. So do you think that, um, and I recognize I'm almost trying to give a prescription that's not necessarily applicable to all businesses. I get it, but don't you think that maybe in that first those early stage, that's 300,000, a million, million to three, that the more of a percentage, and maybe you can even say, is it 80, 20, 90, 10 of the marketing dollars needs to go to more of the direct response, more of a Google pay-per-click, a meta ads directly, where you can attribute dollars in, this is how many leads we got, this is our cost per lead. And then as you get bigger, more of the percentage of the entire marketing budget goes to branding efforts, such as, if depending on the business, if you're a local business, maybe billboards as an example,
Totally.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Yep.
local TV ads, things of that nature, where it's
Hmm.
like, well, we're not necessarily going to be looking at our cost per lead on the TV ads. That is branding and awareness.
Totally. Yeah, you definitely do. When you're smaller, you don't, there's not money to be throwing around like that. Again, there's exceptions to every rule. I would even say, I know some businesses, that local businesses, this works more in the local, and if you're insurance or a lawyer or whatever, the classifieds, or like, the restaurants I remember a restaurant back where I was hometown, where it's like the placemat literally had 25, ads on
Yeah.
it, or
Yeah.
locations and things like that. Like, those are such small ad spans. Like, try it. Who the heck knows? Um, but you ask someone, how many leads have you gotten from that? No one ever knows, right? So if you've got a limited marketing budget, that's probably not the best place to put it. I would rather say, hey, let's put it where we know, um, where the leads are coming from. Can we convert? And it it's so complex now with Google. People are searching. If you've got a product, people are searching for it, you
Yeah.
know, or searching for the pain, the answer to the pain that your product solves.
Yep.
So you should be able to spend money doing it, and the algorithm is better than it's ever been before. Case in point, I told Bradley over the weekend, I have a life event coming up that I want to celebrate when it's over, and I was asking him about watches. Little did I know that Bradley's into watches. And so for about 25 minutes, he's like educating me on all these watches.
25
And
minutes is like 2 hours.
yeah, that's true. Well, the reason why we had 2 hours, because the U.S. sucked at the Ryder Cup, and so
That's
it
true.
was way better to talk about Rolexes and other
Yeah.
watches. And so for 2 days now, I can't get rid of watches in my, you know, and I've never had watches in my feed. But they're
Okay.
listening to us. And
Yeah.
so I'm grateful. Now I'm educated, and now I have, like, the algorithm thinks that I want to watch. And actually the algorithm doesn't think, it knows, because of the
It
conversation we
does.
had,
That's right.
so.
That's right. Yeah. And that actually brings up, no joke, one thing that I think, like I would put you in the bucket, tell me if I'm wrong with this, like as a growth guy. And here's my definition of growth: marketing and sales efforts combined. Okay.
Hmm.
So marketing and sales is an effort to be able to grow a company.
Hmm.
So like I think you're one of the, like your experience, et cetera, is like really on helping companies to grow. Like
Hmm.
and with that, what you just mentioned, it is getting more and more difficult to really understand direct sales attribution. Here's the thing.
Hmm.
Somebody, you're doing a job, let's say you're a local, like I'm in where I'm literally at right now, is I'm at a local exterior remodeling company's office doing this podcast. And so they're doing a job, and they're doing the, hardy board siding as an example for a company. Somebody comes by, they see one of the door hangers sitting right here. Okay, that's
Hmm.
there on their house. They throw it away. 6 months later, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, who was that company?" And they go down the street and they ask their neighbor at the pool or something at the gym, like, "Hey, who did that?" "Oh, that was Freedom." "Okay, got it." And so they do this, and then they go to Google, and then they find them on Google, and then the company ends up attributing the sale to Google. Google didn't have anything to do with the sale. And that's just one
Hmm.
example. And I could just end up laying all these different things.
Totally.
Whereas the attribution has gotten more difficult to know where really did this person come
100%.
from. So I'm curious how you've helped companies to navigate through like, yeah, these things we can track, but some things we can't exactly track exactly where people are coming from.
Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, it was a lot easier. I mean, iOS 14 was the game changer for that. iOS 14, the moment it started basically allowing people not to do cookies and all of that. I mean, literally it ruined Facebook ad agencies' jobs overnight because it was like these people like, oh, our cost per acquisition used to be this, and now it's three times as high, but our sales are the same. It's like, they just weren't able to attribute it because Facebook wasn't actually giving you that because someone opted out, of cookies and all that. So it's becoming harder and harder. You mentioned, marketing and sales. It is kind of like as a growth guy, like I love marketing and sales. And depending on when you met me in my career, you're like, Chad's a marketing guy or Chad's a sales guy. And it's one of those
Yeah.
I love. Like to me, in this modern world, there's not much of a difference. I typically say, I mean, this kind of breaks down in the e-commerce world, but the moment a human has to interact with a customer, that's where sales happens. Everything up to that is marketing. Granted, like you could say there's sales copy on a sales page or, in a cart where there's a product, you're selling it, there's some sales there. But again, I'd say that's more marketing than sales, um, where you're like, not relying on a human, but you're relying on some form of medium to clearly bring someone's pain to life that your product could solve, um, through a hanger, through website copy, through an ad, through video, through whatever. All that's marketing to me. But for us, we have to make a lot of times, like we in this meeting, we had to make assumptions just to say, hey, this is like we're trying to track where sales came from certain launches, different things like that, and maybe 70% we were like dead on, we knew exactly where it's from, but 30% we had to make educated guesses based on, and this would have happened before the meeting where the marketing team came to me and said, hey, we can't directly attribute this to Facebook or whatever, but this person came in this time frame, which we were spending money to the launch or to the webinar or to whatever, and then we just made a determination that's where it was, so that we could at least make the best guess for analysis sake.
Mhm.
um, and again, all this data is for analysis to make better strategic decisions. The whole purpose of knowing your numbers is to be able to see where if things are trending in the right way or if they're not, so that you can put your head together with other people on your team or yourself to solve a problem in your business. The numbers will tell you if there's a problem in the business well before, and again, this is lead measures. The numbers will tell you way before revenue. The problem is most business owners react and they think the problem is revenue, and it's never a revenue problem. It's something else that's driving to revenue. But
Mm.
revenue, I forget the what is it the execution. I forget what it's called, but this is where lead measures and lag measures. Revenue is a lag measure,
Oh,
and
four
if
disciplines of
four disciplines of
execution.
execution, exactly, yes. The lag measure is typically where most business owners make decisions, not lead measures.
Yep.
And this is, I think,
Yep.
this is also, I think, a big thing for that 3 to 10 million. When I say know your numbers, they are making decisions off of lead measures, not lag measures. People sub that or making decisions off of lag measures. It's the only way to scale is to make decisions in your business off of lead measures. So
Yeah.
coming up with KPIs that are lead measures is the thing that's going to help you scale faster than anything.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. And then what I'd love for you to speak into, and this is the last where we'll stop. I feel like this could have been like a Chris Williamson 3 hour podcast or a
I
diary
would
of a
talk with
CEO.
you for
Steve,
3 hours about business all the time, Bradley.
no, we should probably just do that and we
We
make
hung
it three
out,
hours and we'll,
we hung out all weekend. It didn't talk business. It was great.
it was great. It was so great. Yeah. I was very throttled. I was like, all right, when I go, we talked about it for like 10 minutes on the back deck.
That's
Anyway,
true. Yeah,
so okay. I'm gonna ask this question under the context of a CRM.
yeah.
This is not about what CRM is good and this, that, and the other. It's
Hmm.
irrelevant to that. But as an example, if you have a CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, what GHL, Go High Level, etc., is that if you hire an implementation person to set up your CRM, they can put all kinds of whiz bangs on there. And what ends up happening is that then they can show you all these numbers, and all these dashboards can be created, but it can be unbelievably overly complex. Okay, that's what I
Hmm.
was getting at. Is that there's a $2 million company that I was talking to recently, and they're trying to obviously go to three, and then from there to go to eight over the next handful of years. And I was looking at some of his dashboards because he was basically talking about
Hmm.
complexity. I got stressed out for about 10 minutes looking at all the things they were measuring. I was like, do
Hmm.
you even know what any of this means? This is the most complex set of
Hmm.
numbers that they're
Yep.
trying to overly measure things. So while you and I have talked about like you got to know your numbers and you got to measure on the lead measures, there's also, did you also see that sometimes you can see people
Oh
over
yeah.
engineer things? It's like, whoa, that
Oh,
is way
totally.
too complex.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's nothing, there's data points that different levels of management of the business need to look at. And so there's a dashboard that should be C-level. There should be a dashboard that, and um, for me, when I think of lead measures, when I say KPIs, like when I work with clients, I'm going to get you to three. Here's the three things you need to be looking at. If we know these three numbers, doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're tracking, but these are the things you're making decisions off of. And
Mm,
if you have limited time in a day to look at, these are the three things you're going to look at. And they're different in every business. I can't tell you exactly what three are, but typically it's going to be around something about leads, how many leads are coming into the business, the conversion of those leads. And that conversion could be to a sales call or to a sale, depending on what your business is. Um, and, um, you know, to me, those are like, if you're not doing that, like that's a big, big mistake. I'm trying to think what else could be um, like sales calls had that day. Because if you know your conversion rate, how many calls like were actually completed, because not every sales call is completed because people don't show. But that's something
mhm,
that you could be looking at to be able to see if hey, we normally average 7 sales calls because we've got 3 reps and we did 2 today, and then you see that trend 3 days in a row, something's wrong.
mhm.
Like, so that's the type of data you want to be looking at and to be able to know at any given point where you're at.
Yeah,
Sure, there might be 20 things that your CRM is reporting so that when something is off, you can then go and be like, well, why is it off? And then you can go, and those dashboards are helpful to to be able to tell the story on this so you can then be strategic. But if you haven't been looking at numbers, I would say it's like, and it's hard to do. What are the three? Because the business owner is going to tell you there's 7 things they need to be looking at all given times. Okay. That I'm like, it's asking the hard questions. Okay, why is that relevant? What's more important than that you don't have to worry about that number,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And it take that sometimes that takes a full day to wrestle to the ground. Like, but
for sure.
it's not a waste of time, because the waste of time is you're going to be looking at 7 numbers every day. That then if you're looking at seven, the reality is you're looking at 30, because
Mm,
out of those seven, you're unhappy with three. So then you go digging. And before
mm,
you know it, it's the end of the day and you didn't solve anything. You just got a bigger web of problems. This is what you're talking about with like measuring too much data.
yeah. Um, I'm going to close with this. I have the longer that I've been in business, the more that I've tried to help business owners, there are fewer and fewer hills I'm willing to die on.
Mm, yeah.
One of them is I believe everything is downhill from the vision that the business owner has. Like every decision you make on marketing, team, personnel, your time, everything, I think is ultimately downhill from what it is we're trying to accomplish. Like where the heck are we
Mm,
trying to go? What are your thoughts? And that's a super broad question. So just, a short answer. Like, what are your thoughts whenever you're working with a business owner on how much time do you spend on like, hey, what is it you're trying to do here first so I can understand all these decisions we're making is at least to this end?
yeah. I mean, I can't help solve your problem as a business owner if I don't know what you want. So it's right. Like it's the first thing. And here's the thing, vision leaks. So you think you communicated vision at the beginning of the year, and you wonder why people by June and you haven't talked about vision again, and everyone in your company is frustrated, and you look under the hood, everyone's doing something different and they're not going after the thing that you communicated in January, which guess what happens in almost every business is, and then we coach this through Business Made Simple with Donald Miller, is every freaking week when you meet with your team, you share your vision statement,
Mm,
because vision leaks. You when you highlight stories of transformation, you bring it back to vision. As a CEO, you can never communicate about vision too much because it leaks in a bad way. If someone doesn't hear the vision for 3 weeks, they create their own vision.
Hmm.
And so it's hugely important to come back to that. I've got a client. Their job is to end, like, they want to end world divorce. And
Hmm.
today at 6 p.m. I've got a meeting with them, and so I know, like, at the end of the day, we're making decisions on that. Last week they had they're in the certification business, and they have people that are kind of ripping off their content, and small compared to them. And I'm like, you guys are spending so much time worried about these people that are potentially maybe could build a $60,000 business. You're doing $4.5 million. Why
Hmm.
do you care? And if they help you solve your mission and your vision, more power to you, right?
More power
And
to
it
it.
was like
Yeah,
it was a huge, like, the breakthrough. They're like, oh my gosh, how much energy I've spent worried about that. Now
totally.
they've like freed it up to be like, oh, it's not how I would want my vision to be achieved, but they're helping.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Chad, you're such a good friend. Good golfer too. Can't wait to take some money off of your back pocket when the next time we play golf. But people want to know about
Hey,
you, connect with you,
I'm
follow
padding
you.
my handicap. I'm padding my handicap for that game. Don't you worry.
Oh, well, we're not. I mean, I'm not giving you any strokes whenever we play. That's for dang sure. People want to connect with you on social and find out where would you point them to?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place. I'm pretty much referral based, but Instagram, I'll share what I'm doing at ccannon21, or LinkedIn, just Chad Cannon's a great place to find me. I love working with founder-led business and executive teams, and we typically start with a strategy session where we kind of sit down and say, hey, what is it that we want to solve? Some of it is like, hey, we've got a marketing problem. Sometimes we have a sales problem, but we don't. It's funny you bring it up at the last little bit. It's like, it's a matter of who your customer is and why you're doing what you're doing. I can't come in and coach you or consult with you until if that's not clear. um,
Hmm.
doesn't really matter what you're doing, and
Yeah,
so that again comes down to that mindset. And when that 3 to 10 million, part of your job is literally making sure that unmistakably everyone is clear every day on what the vision of the company is.
yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. No doubt about it.
Thanks
Well,
for
my
having me.
biggest, yeah, man, it's great having you on here. My biggest takeaways are the four: the mindset of the owner, the understanding you got to get out of the rainmaker seat, really understanding your numbers and the layers of leadership that come in, and then the very last one as a bonus, the part around vision leaks. Chad, appreciate you
Yep.
coming on, man.
Yep. Thanks, Bradley. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Chad. He really is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to growing a company from the marketing and sales perspective. And in addition to what I said is kind of my two key takeaways, I'll add even an additional bonus, and that is when he talked about like marketing and sales are even getting harder to distinguish. And I totally agree with him. I think that's why I like to distinguish the combination of those two things as like, what are your growth efforts, period? What are we doing to grow? So definitely check him out. Go and follow him on Instagram, connect with him on LinkedIn if you would love to be able to get your own, as we call it, blueprint to help you to scale from 3 to 10 million. I want to give a shout out to my podcast sponsors, Autopilot Recruiting, Coach P Consulting, Club Capital, and Direct Clicks. Go to directclicksinc.com/ above the business, directclicksinc.com/ above the business, and they will help have you, they will help, sorry, they will set you up with your free marketing audit. We just talked to Chad today. If you're an insurance agency owner and you would like to be able to know, well, how is my marketing performing? The best place to start is with DirectClicks, directclicksinc.com/ above the business. Find out how your SEO, your social, all of your marketing efforts is doing to help you to grow your insurance agency. directclicksinc.com/ above the business. From there, one of the things that you do after you make the investments in the marketing is obviously in your sales efforts. But how does all of this affect your financials. That's where Club Capital comes in. If you want to be able to see and start to forecast some of these growth numbers, Club Capital CFO services can help you do just that. Go to club.capital. And again, I say all of these intertwined because, quite frankly, I think that they are. With direct clicks helping you with your marketing efforts, Club Capital helping you to manage your financials, and then Coach P helping you to manage your sales team and even you to understand what strategies are they putting in place in their agencies that you can employ into your agencies. Go to coachpconsulting.com, coachpconsulting.com. Let him know you heard about him on the Above the Business podcast. Obviously, I believe business is a team sport and you can't have a team unless you go about recruiting. Autopilot can take that part of the recruiting process. It's such a pain, but is also important off of your plate. Help buy back your time. Go to autopilotrecruiting.com, autopilotrecruiting.com. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that episode with Chad. Until next time, lead well and go be great.